This is Jackie, and I'm here with Neil Hilborn. We are at Jam and Java in Vienna, Virginia. Neil is here performing a little spoken word. I call it like spoken word comedy. What do you call it?
Man, I don't know. Genre is a difficult thing. For the longest time, I called myself a slam poet, right? But, I feel like that has a lot of connotations to it. So I just say, I don't know, man, I do poetry. I do spoken word. I think that sort of necessitates that I do a lot of comedy, just because people, my set's an hour and change, and people just really aren't trying to have feelings for that long. I just need to break it up with something funny, and it's mostly making fun of myself. But spoken word, a little bit of comedy, a little bit of storytelling. I don't know, man. I do poetry.
And you've got some musicians performing with you as well.
Yeah. I have Bree, who is her project is called Many Rooms, and she describes it as sad girl ambient music, and it's very accurate. I like Bree a lot, but she's definitely also Tim Burton's stepdaughter. So yeah, she's been great, man. She's really she's been on this tour with us for about a month, and she's really dealt with our terrible personalities and awful jokes the whole time. So I like and appreciate Brie a whole time.
So it's a good thing that you perform at bars every once in a while.
I'm saying. The drunker they are, the funnier I am. So.
So how do you think, I think I have my own answer to this. I'm pretty sure everyone does. How does music and poetry overlap? Because I usually interview musicians,
Sure.
But I definitely see a common thread.
Yeah, I think about meter, which is another way to talk about musicality all the time. Even in free verse poetry, where I'm not doing anything formal, I don't have any explicit rhymes or meters. I still pick the sections that need to hit the hardest, and I'm like, nah, this is gonna be in dactylic hexameter, and there's gonna be these two internal rhymes. You know what I mean? All that rhythm and meter, that's all right there. I think the only difference is that I can't play guitar despite all of my best efforts. Really, it's just, I feel like it's all just people trying to distill their inner states of being into a way that somebody else can understand, and just everybody just has a particular avenue to get there, but I don't know, it's all just expression.
Well, and your avenue is your new book, The Future. Comes out in a few days. I have it in our hot little hands. So this is the second book, correct?
Yes, it's my second full length.
First one is Our Numbered Days.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not letting you look in that one. It's my private book, so
Good. Yeah.
That's my stash
Cool,
there.
great.
So, The Future kind of that's an ominous title for some folks. Mm-hmm. Is it ominous for you? Or is it optimistic? Is it a little bit of everything?
I'm an anxiety-ridden person.
Same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Being alive is terrifying, but I don't know. I think so. It's okay. So the book is named after sort of the poem, right? It's interesting, the title poem, The Future, it's I think it's my second biggest poem in a lot of ways, and it's one that was never really published anywhere, not intentionally, it just kind of it didn't fit in Our Numbered Days, and then it fit really well in this book. But, and that, when I wrote that poem, I wrote that poem forever ago. I wrote it in 2012, 13. I don't remember. I have brain damage, but I was definitely writing it at this moment where this idea of the future really switched for me. Where before, I didn't really think I had a future. I just always I think I always grew up with this sort of weird certainty that I was gonna I talk about this at the end of the set. But I grew up with a certainty that I was gonna die early, that I wasn't gonna live past 23, 24, and my diagnosis with bipolar disorder when I was 21 didn't really help that, but I wrote that poem. I woke up one morning and sort of realized, hey, Neil, you might actually live for a while. You might have some stuff to do. So that poem for me, it's almost an attempt to take that anxiety out of this idea of the future for myself and try to envision what a future might be like for me. So. Yeah, man, I don't know. That's the first time anybody's ever asked me that question, so I kind of rambled a little bit. But yes, it's big and scary, and I'm trying to make it less so.
I teach high school students, so the future is definitely something that is intimidating as a young person, as someone in her schmurdies also finds finds that word, kind of intimidating as well. It's like, I don't think that there's any, I mean, maybe there is, someone please tell me if there is a point in your life where you're like, oh no, it's okay, like I'm good with where I'm at. Because like I've got a stable job, I've got an apartment and a car, and I still don't know what the hell I'm gonna do with my life. Like, like when does it? When do we get it?
No, I feel like that anybody that acts like they know what they're doing for the rest of their lives is either bored or lying. So I don't know, man. I just don't.
I agree with you on that one. So the title of the book obviously has significance to the poem as well. 2018 has been pretty rough so far, man. I mean, 2016 sucked.
Dude.
I don't know if we want to go back that far, but it sucked.
It sucked.
And then we were like, wait, if we can just get to 2017, it's going to be so good.
17.
And then it wasn't.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I mean, thankfully, we've got music like the Gaslight Anthem. I know you're a fan as well, because people from New Jersey are awesome.
Are you from Jersey?
I
Where in
am.
New Jersey are you from?
Sussex County.
Okay, all right. I feel like I vaguely know where that is. Where is it?
I mean, New Jersey's considered the armpit of the nation by some places, so I'm north and west of New York City, where there's like trees and cows and stuff like that.
I've been there, yeah.
Really? Because there's nothing to visit.
So a friend of mine her family has like a cabin kind of up in that, like right in that weird point where it's like Jersey and Pennsylvania and New York.
That really is where I'm from.
Cool, great. I'm not gonna say specific. We'll talk later. I don't want to like name any specific names because like she'll get mad at me. But so I think I've been like right there. Anyway, cool.
So how does music, for many people, especially young people, but adults too, turn to music when times get tough? What are some either acts or songs that you sort of turn to when you're like, either I've got to clear my mind or I got to reset my mind, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the context, but like I often look to like some of my favorite bands, like the Gaslight Anthem, for instance. They're certainly the band that I've listened to the most in my life. And so, like, for me, my two favorite bands are, like, them and the Mountain Goats. And so, like, I just kind of flip back and forth between those two bands when I really need to, like, reset. Or often, like, I just... I don't know. There's this little voice in my head sometimes that tells me, like, hey, dude, right now you've really got to just listen to some death metal. And so, like, I mean, we were doing that yesterday. We landed and we're having a really, really, really rough day. So we just put on this Bathory record and it hurt. And, but it was, like, exactly what we needed in that moment. So, yeah, for me, it's, like, there's just often that little voice that dictates, like, hey, this is what's going to help you reset right now. So, yeah, normally, like, in the green room before I go on, I'm listening to something, man. Usually this tour it's been a lot of pop punk, but a lot of like that like modern pop punk, like Iron Chic, and like Cheap Girls and stuff like that. It's really been like, basically like old dudes that still want to make pop punk. I'm like, I identify with that. Like my back hurts, but I'm still trying to talk about being in love, so
Yeah, I mean that is some good pop punk. Spring break is almost here, man. And talking is hard.
Yeah, dude.
Shoots. But getting back to your music, see, I'm really clearly used to it, but your writing, things that have inspired writing for this book, is it different or similar, your sort of writing process and the things that have influenced you?
Similar in that the process is, my process is pretty much the same, it's just more refined. I think when I was writing my first book, like, also when I started writing my first book, I was still in college, and so, like, I was just reading all the time, but it was just kind of whatever my professors told me to read, which is great. I read some really, really great books, but I think with this book, I mean, I haven't been in college for years, and so I finally, like, figured out what works for me, where it's, like, as soon as I'm out of poetry books to read, there are like a couple bookstores in St. Paul where I live that I know the staff, and I'm just like, hey, would you get in? What do you like? What's new? And so I just go and I buy a bunch of new poetry books and I just read them until I get inspired by something. And usually it's like a line or a phrase or an image or a particular like conceit that a poem uses or something. And so I just keep reading. I just keep jamming stuff into my head until my brain puts enough pieces together that I can produce something. So yeah, I think it's more like when I was writing this book, I just had a more structured process where I was like, no, I get up at 8 every day and I go to the coffee shop I used to work at because that's where they give me free shit, and I just hang out there until I have 3 poems done, and so that, it's like I wouldn't say easier, but it's almost got into routine for writing, which is new for me, because before I was just like, I just write poems when I feel like it, and you can't be a professional anything when just when you feel like it. So yeah, man, it's just it's specific structured work now, which I like a lot.
Structure is sometimes helpful. Now, you don't have to answer this in no type of pressure, because I am a high school English teacher, but the writing process.
Yes.
A lot of us, especially if we're not a big fan of writing or whatever the task is, we write it, we turn it in, we're done. Mm-hmm. Not always the best process. How many sort of revisions and drafts on average do you think you go through, or like what is your revision process?
Sure. I firmly believe that editing is writing. I think that anybody who says like, oh, I don't edit my poems because like my first draft is my best draft, like that person's a bad poet, and you shouldn't be friends with them. Because like, I mean, I don't know. I think I'm being a jerk. There are some people who can absolutely like. I have some friends who do this. They just like kind of think about a poem for 3 months and they like kick around a few lines, and this is all an editing process. They just want to pretend it's not. But then like after a while of just like really intense thought sitting with a poem, it kind of comes out mostly finished. And that's not how I am at all. Like I'm very much a process kind of person. Like my first drafts are trash, man. I write, I try to write a whole bunch of stuff every day, and like 90% of the stuff I write, well, more like 80 these days, because I think I'm better at it, but most of that stuff never leaves my notebook. Like, people don't know that I ever wrote it because it's garbage. So yeah, I just take my first draft and I pick out the usually 3 or 4 lines that are actually working, and I just cut everything else and I rewrite around those lines, and then I just do that over and over until I have something that I feel like is actually fucking worth reading, That's not just all the brain detritus I had to get through to get to what I was actually trying to say with the poem. So, that's a long way to answer your question. On average, like, if it's something that I'm thinking about performing, it normally goes through 8 to 10 drafts of varying intensity. But and then if it's something that's just going to be on the page, maybe it's a shorter poem, those go through like 3 to 5 drafts. And that's an average, obviously. Like, I'll occasionally knock it out of the park with a poem, but that's rare. So, yeah, man, just a lot of thinking, just a lot of sitting at a computer and being like, well, this line sucks, but I don't know what to do with it yet. Next line, so.
I think editing is definitely something that, while it's not necessarily a fun process, it definitely results in a much better product.
I like editing personally. For me, it's my favorite part because like it sort of demystifies the creative process for me, because like then the poem just kind of becomes an equation almost, where it's like I'm like, okay, this line isn't working, and I see generally the kind of thing that needs to go here. So like, what line can I write that has this cadence and hits this word at the end of it that fits in here? You know what I mean? So like then it becomes. Yeah, it's almost a game to me at that point. It's not just like, oh, I gotta talk about my feelings,
Well, speaking of talking about feelings,
yes.
Is writing for you cathartic? Is it therapeutic? Is it challenging? Is it all of those things?
Yeah, it's, it's weird. It definitely used to be more therapeutic for me than it is these days. And I think that's partially because, like, it's my job now, So, like, I don't want to say pressure because that's not necessarily true, but there's more, I just, like, have to have a little more structure to it. I can't just say whatever I want or whatever I'm thinking because like I'm writing with an audience in mind, It's definitely still therapeutic, and I definitely still write things that people are never going to see, but like because I do it as my job, that's like that it's I don't know. I just like don't when I'm having a bunch of feelings, I don't want to go to work to have them. You know what I mean? So for me, the most therapeutic thing these days has been therapy. But, which is very important. Therapy is very important. Go to therapy. Yeah, I mean, it's still, for me, I think the most therapeutic thing now is like, so like in my new set that I've been doing on this tour, there are definitely some poems that are still like pretty rough and about like things that are still emotionally raw for me. And so the most helpful thing has actually just been, like getting on stage and just doing those poems over and over and over again, because there's something, it almost desensitizes you to that stuff if like you're just talking about it over and over and over, when like, and I'm like, man, I've talked about this thing 50 times at this point and nothing bad has happened yet, so it's probably going to be fine. So that's been super helpful these days.
So there's help in the repetition itself.
Yeah,
I like that. So how do you go about choosing which poems you want to perform and which ones you don't? Or is there something that you know, I'm never going to perform this?
Oh yeah. There are definitely pieces when I write them. I'm like, man, I like this piece, but it's never gonna work on stage. So like, I have my set kind of down. Like I know where I start and I know where I end, and I know that I've got to hit like OCD and Joey and a few other poems. I know that they kind of have to go in the set. And they just occur at specific points. But then, like, I change out stuff a fair bit, where, like, like, there's a point, like, about 10, 15 minutes into the set where a couple new pieces can go, and then there's, like, a part right toward the end where, like, if I'm thinking about trying something new, I'm like, hey, I think I might be able to perform this. And by this point in the set, I'll have earned enough goodwill to maybe make some mistakes. I'll like throw it in, and if I feel something, if I get a reaction from the audience, if I have fun performing it, then I'll try to include it in future sets. So yeah, at this point, like I'm just messing around in shows after I feel like I can screw up a little bit, you know.
You're in charge. You're allowed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like it's the kind of thing where like I always had this idea in poetry, specifically in poetry slams, that like when what I came out of is that like you've got to earn the audience's trust, and like I don't have to do that as much because they already bought a ticket to come to the shows. They're already kind of invested, but I still have to continually keep that trust up, let's say, and so I'm not trying to just like do a bunch of new poems that I don't know how to perform because they're going to be like, what the fuck, I paid for the show. Like, why is his dumbass just talking about his bunnies? But I do have two rabbits. They're very lovely. Their names are Beatrice and Penelope, and I have a lot of poems about them that I don't think people will care about. Yeah, I feel like after a certain point, when I've like showed, hey, I can do this, I've earned not the right, but like the maybe the time to like be like, hey, I'm going to do something new for 2.5 minutes, and if it doesn't work, that's okay, right? Cool, great, you know?
Just going to give this a shot.
Yeah.
Do you feel a sense of, like, obligation or responsibility to perform OCD and Joey, or do you just, is it still just, I don't want to say enjoyable because it's not the right word.
Sure.
But do you feel that, like, they fit into what you want to say in your narrative?
Yeah, I think so. And, I mean, again, this is a bit I actually do on stage, but, okay, so in the video of OCD that went viral, there's that actually like in that performance was going to be the last time I ever performed the poem. I had technically, I know, right? I had technically already retired it, right? Because I wrote it like 3 years before, and I've been touring with it and competing with it, and I thought that I wasn't bringing anything new to the piece anymore. But like I showed up at this tournament, and I made individual finals, and Sam, the CEO of Button, was like, hey, Neil, go do OCD. I don't have a video of it. I was like, sure, bro, whatever. So I did the poem, and then I got off stage. I was like, never doing that poem again.
Yeah, you didn't drop the mic on that one,
Right.
sorry.
No, not at all. So anyway, like, it's, I don't want to say obligation because that makes it sound like I don't want to do it. You know what I mean? Like, if people come to the show because they saw that poem, that's awesome. And if I have to spend 3 minutes a night, like, paying homage to that weird thing that happened on the internet, like, that's fine with me, you know? Like, right, like, I mean, I somehow improbably have a career because, like, people saw that poem, like, great, I'll spend 3 minutes being like, cool, thanks for coming, guys, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, I mean, like, ask me again in 10 years, maybe I'll be totally sick of that poem. Maybe I'll be dead, though, so who knows?
Or you'll just, like, write another Freebird and you'll be fine.
Yeah, you can definitely write 2 Freebirds. Yeah, you know, name 3 other Skynyrd songs.
Thankfully, I'm not old enough, so I don't have to worry about that.
Like, I'm like, give me 3 steps. Simple Man. Nope, that's it. All right.
Nope. So speaking of OCD, and you know, it certainly went viral in a very unexpected way. Not that I think anyone really expects things to go viral. I mean, very few people are I think, successful in purposefully viralizing something.
More than you would think, but
True. I don't have that skill.
It's
my bad.
It's not A skill. It's okay. I don't know anything about anything, right? But it's from what I've learned, just being around people who work with video and YouTube and stuff. Is like it's not a skill, but there are tools, and there's like a certain structure that you can build that will guarantee that a lot of people see videos. Anyway.
Gotcha. So, what role do you think social media has in your life now and in your job? Because do you feel that there's certainly that sort of piece where you're not really targeting, but it's in your mind?
Absolutely, it is. I mean, like now that what I do for a living is I tour and I sell books. Like, I definitely think pretty intentionally about what goes on social media, and for me, it's been a challenge of like how to shamelessly promote myself while still providing like more work that people like, like, so even if like I post on Instagram, I post like a little quote image from like one of my books or something, I always like, even though I'm saying like, hey, you can get this in my book, which is right here, I always try to like add something to it or like give a little backstory for this quote or like say like, oh, this poem is about this thing, which I think is funny because of this, so even I'm always like trying to be like, hey, yes, I understand, I'm trying to get your money, but I want to show you that I care about you giving me your money. It's not just like, give it to me because I deserve it. It's like, no, I want to earn it,
Less sandwich picks, more poetry. All right, maybe a few sandwich picks.
I'm saying, listen, all the sandwich pictures are on my phone because, like, this whole tour has just been us eating sandwiches in weird cities, but, like, I'm not putting those on my Instagram. I'm just, like, looking at them to fall asleep. So,
I mean, a good sandwich is kind of a fantasy piece. I mean, I think you could probably write some things about some.
Written a bunch of poems about sandwiches.
It's just not in the book.
No, it's not in the book because they're not good poems.
Hey, inspiration comes from different sources. So 2018, maybe words I can't say on the microphone right now, but maybe just maybe we're starting to chip away at this stigma of mental illness. But I still feel like it's very polarizing, like especially with all of the violence that's happened with young people in schools. It's immediately, well, there was a mental health issue that was never addressed, perhaps, and that's important. But also I feel like it's still become very stigmatizing or an excuse for behavior, or
Right.
It's like that's what we're looking for, but what about the 16 steps before that?
Exactly. I hear a lot of stuff about like, oh, if only we had more adequate mental health care in this country. I'm like, yes, but also what if we had gun control in this country? You know what I mean? Right. So yeah, it's definitely, mental health care is an issue. It's absolutely, and like access to mental health care is a huge issue, but it's not the only thing contributing to gun violence.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I feel like we've come so far, and then these other events happen that kind of pull us back, and so it's just like an sort of an ebb and flow. But what do you think still needs to change about sort of the topic, the issues of mental health, and kind of how we? I'm at a lack of word to the end of my sentence, but where do you think we've certainly come a certain way?
Right.
What do we need to keep doing?
So I think that, yes, destigmatizing is important, right? We need to be able to talk about stuff. But I think also normalizing is important, right? Where, like, yeah, you can talk about stuff, but if you only talk about mental illness in, like, hushed tones, like, oh, my God, you're depressed? Oh, no. Like, I feel like that's almost, not almost, it's not as damaging. It's still very damaging, though, because it turns it into a thing you can only touch with kid gloves, right? And to me, like, I think that's what I try to do in a lot of the set, is I try to make jokes about like my anxiety or suicidal ideation, because to me that's how I can introduce something into normal conversation, right? It's like if I can laugh about it, then it's suddenly not a huge scary deal anymore. Then it's just a thing I'm dealing with every day. So I think that what I'd like to see change is I'd like to see people feel that freedom to just talk about, like, oh, I'm feeling really depressed today. Like, man, I really want to kill myself. Ha ha ha. Like, I want to see people be able to have that normal conversation. Because I think that's, I don't know, that just makes it seem like a treatable thing instead of a gigantic, overwhelming, crushing thing in your life.
I think it would be nice to talk about it too in the before and not just in the after.
Exactly.
After something bad happens, after we worry about this, after something bad.
Yep.
To talk about it before as a more preventative measure would, I think, be.
Medicine?
Oh my God.
Medicine?
Oh my God. What advice do you have to young people about finding their voice, whether it's through something written, something spoken, musical, anything in between?
I feel very unqualified to give advice about anything because I'm
Well,
an idiot that lucked into my job.
but was there a turning point where you're like, I should write this down, I should vocalize this?
You know, for me, I've always been a writer. At least as far like I think I wrote my first poem when I was like 8 or something like that. It was very bad, but
Sandwiches.
no, it was about like the moon. Straight up though, like I was like reading a Calvin and Hobbes book, and there was this like big picture of the moon, and I was like, ooh, the moon, nighttime, ooh, you know. Anyway, but I think the thing that was most helpful for me with finding my voice, which I feel like I didn't really start to happen upon until I was like 19, 20. Before I was just like writing copies of what I was reading, and you know, you gotta copy stuff. That's the other thing is like you just gotta just rip off stuff that you like until you figure out not what you can not only rip off and reproduce, but add something new to. And so like I was writing like a lot of like formal stuff, trying to be like Wordsworth or William Blake when I was a like, you know, young adolescent, and I was like 16, 17, and I was writing a bunch of like bad confessional rip-off stuff. I was like, I'm Stevie Smith and Philip Larkin, like, ooh, this stuff kind of rhymes, but not really because I'm sad, you know. And so like I think that I didn't start to really figure it out until I started doing spoken word, and seeing that like you can shout while you're doing a poem. Turns out you can be loud and sad, you know. I think my point is that it's important to allow yourself to experiment, and in that allow yourself to fail. You know, I think that like so often I do this now even like I'm afraid to write something weird or take a risk because I like somewhere in my reptile brain I'm like, no, if this isn't perfect, then it's a representation of who I am as a writer, and then I'm not a perfect writer. And like you're not, no, like you're never, like you're not gonna be batting 1,000 all the time, you know. And like if you write something bad, just never show it to anybody. Like,
Or keep reworking it until it's better.
exactly. I'm saying so. Like I think that for me, figuring out my voice was all about just imitating as many things as I could and taking weird risks and writing stuff that didn't work and performing stuff that didn't work. Oh my God, I was so bad for the first 3 years I did spoken word. I'm sure if you came to any of those shows, you'd be like, man, this guy's never going to make it anywhere.
Suckers.
Dude, I'm saying, like, they were so wrong. No, I mean, anyway, that's a whole ego thing I'm not going to get into. But, like, yeah, you're never, like, going to die because you wrote a bad poem, you know? You got to just, like, write shitty stuff till you're not shitty anymore. So
I think that's definitely a good takeaway.
Yep.
So what's up next for you? What is in the future? See what I did there, folks.
yeah. So this year is basically just going to be the future world tour. This U.S. thing is the first leg of it, let's say, and this is show number 18 of this tour. I think there are like 6 more. That sounds right. I don't know. I might be making stuff up. But yeah, and then after we're done in Seattle at the beginning of May, we're going to take a little break. I'm going to do a couple college shows, but that's mostly just me working out a bunch of new material until this summer. I'm going to do a bunch of music festivals in the UK and Europe. So I'm doing like, I maybe shouldn't say this, but I'm doing like Leeds and Reading Festival and like Download Festival and like doing a show at the Edinburgh Fringe, stuff like that. And then this fall I'm doing a UK tour with some people to be announced shortly. And that might dovetail into a Europe tour, and then December going back to Australia and New Zealand. So yeah, I'm just touring, man, just running around all year, and then in the time that I have off here and there, I'm gonna be writing my next book, which is a nonfiction book. So yeah.
So staying busy, excellent.
Yeah.
We'll stay tuned for the future of Neil Hilborn. This is Jackie. Thanks to In the Key of Change.